Okay, and then the fish are being pushed to one side of it. Now you could even do that further in what they call cut the seine. So you're not really cutting the seine. What you're doing is cutting a section of it to do that same thing, just with a little piece of it, because you have so many fish in there. Now you have another boat that's going to be outside. And what's going to happen now, he has like a giant vacuum cleaner on his boat. It's a big tube, and it's maybe 20 or 30 feet long. And they're going to bring that over here and suck the fish right out of this net as we bring them to the top. They just get vacuumed right out and put on the carrier. And in the process, as they get put on the carrier, they go through this sort of tube like a water slide with some rough bottoms and some screens in it that pushes the scales off the fish at the same time. And the scales are collected. Now they go into a scale bag. Before, they used to have scale baskets. The Passamaquoddy is handmade, and then they were plastic ones. We have the scales coming off the fish, and we have a load of fish, and now they're coming to Seal Cove to our herring stand here. Let's go outside. Off the boat and onto land. As we do that, the scales are being removed, and they're going into, nowadays, a large scale bag. We want to get the scales off and save them because we sell them. Scales last year in Eastport were bringing $1.08 to $1.11 for 1 pound, while the fish were only bringing 8 cents. Let's go back to that fish swimming, that herring swimming around. That herring, in effect, is luring its predators to it. Huh? That shine and that glitter, that pearlescence in the water, just luring. So all those hake and those haddock, the pollock, the cod, all of those fish, they see that and they just can't help themselves. They're right on it. They're attacking it.
That's just like a fishing lure, right?
Yeah, just like a fishing lure. So in a way, that same luring effect is what the scales are really all about in terms of the sail. I'll give you an example of it. If you take a little smell.
Oh my. I recognize that.
Now who recognizes that smell?
Fingernail polish.
Yeah.
And so what's going on here? Why do women wear fingernail?
To lure.
It's still an attraction.
And it's working.
It's still the attraction. By the way, it was also used in lipsticks.
Yeah.
It was used in eyeliners. It was used in costume jewelry. It was used in specialty paints that men put on their motorcycles or sports cars. It's that pearlescence, which actually, if you took the individual scale, it's not really the scale. If you put the scale between your fingers and you sort of pushed your thumb over your finger, it would separate, and you'd have the pearl, and that's what it is. It's that separate. Wow. It's that pearlescence.
I did not know that.
Even like, let's say you go to the supermarket, and sometimes we stare at that shampoo. There's like 15 shampoos are in the pharmacy, and you're looking at them. You know which one to buy, except maybe the less expensive or the biggest one. But it's often that pearlescence, sort of floating in the middle of the bottle. It attracts your eyes. So this old herring is still doing its, even dead, it's still doing its job of luring us. And here we are at the top of the food chain. Yeah. We always think of ourselves a little high and mighty and being at the height of the food chain. But as a friend of mine said, we're so smart that we're the only creatures on the face of the earth that have figured out a way to pay rent and taxes. The second reason we want the scale off the fish is the scales are nature's way to protect the fish from the salt environment. Okay, so we get the scales off, and now we can brine them. So let's go in and take a look at a brine tank. So here we are in a brine tank. Like the building that would have been used for this had about 10 of these in it. What you would do here is you would try to keep up what they call a 60% salinity. So folklorically, you might say something like enough salt in the water to float an egg. Gets you, if you were looking at it on a hydrometer, or here they call it a picometer, that would pretty much get you to 60%, which is different than 100%, which would be
a salt block, wouldn't it?
What is it?
A salt block.
Just about. It's at 100%, salt will not dissolve in water. You get to the point where no matter how much you stir it or boil it, it's not going anywhere. And they would use that for kippers, but for much shorter periods of time, maybe 15 seconds in that kind of solution before they smoke it. Corned beef, certain kind of meats get exposed to 100% brine for a while. But this got 60%, but instead of 15 seconds, these little fish would be sitting in here for 2 or 3 days. So it's very important to get the salt content right deep down into the bone. That's important for later when we're drying through our smoking process, and we have this product that's going to go around the world. We don't want it to be able to get maggots or bacteria. And remember, no refrigeration. So that's the big key here.
Yeah.
That we're able to sell protein throughout the world without refrigeration. That was a kind of neat thing to be able to do.
Yeah.
So would the cod be the same process? Like
It was
cod
different.
a
Well,
big
those hard
industry
cod
here?
that you almost feel like you could play baseball with, that was
Yeah.
salt cod.
Oh.
It didn't go through the smoking process. Okay? It was just made to totally eliminate the moisture. And then they have a product that was softer, like a Finn and Hattie kind of product. But that needed more refrigeration. That was meant to be eaten more quickly.
Yeah.
All right, so from here, after 2 or 3 days, the brine master, and he was a master. It was an important job because that salinity changed constantly. Because as the fish were taking in the salt, the salinity of the water would change and it would become not salty enough, not brine enough. So he had to keep that up. Otherwise, the fish would get mushy and you'd have to throw out the lot.
So would they just bring in salt water from the?
Well, they brought salt is one of the few things that they imported, and not because they couldn't make it here. They knew how to make it. The native peoples would have been making it for centuries, and the early settlers did as well by evaporative process. But it was so much easier since they had boatloads of the finished product going to the Caribbean. It was so much easier to fill the holes with salt on the way back. Because salt in the Caribbean, you have the hot sun on these little bayous during the day, so the salt just collected. So the tide would go down a bit and you just shovel it. I mean, it's a much easier process. You're not burning down half your forest to start boiling kettles of seawater to, that sort of way to get salt. So it was just advantageous to do it that way. And they bring up sugar, I guess, for their own table use and things like that. And of course, when they were always talking about that mercantile trade of sugar being moved all over the world to the mother country and all of that, a lot of that sugar came in the form of rum. They don't tell you that so much in the history classes in grammar school and high school, but that was one of the ways that sugar got transported. Okay, so now the brine master says, we're done. It's all brined up. Now we scoop in, take our fish, and it would usually go through a hole in the wall, just like this one in front of us. People would be calling for fish, and you'd be dumping fish in front of the stringer stations. Now you might have a stringer station with 8 or 10 people here. And these are the stringer stakes. So we'd be going through the gill and out the mouth, through the gill and out the mouth, through the gill and out the mouth, with some speed. I mean, it would almost look like an old Keystone Cop, those old movies where people, moving real quickly. So, and then you get about 16 or 18 fish on each one of these. And as soon as you get one done, which in the 1950s you'd be getting a penny for, in the 1960s about 2 cents, and you'd put it on a herring cart, which is we have through the wall here. You see it?
Yeah.
It'd all be stacked, huh? So you'd have that all filled with fish. And it sounds like people were being paid nothing for this at a penny a stick or 2 cents a stick. But in reality, there was an older woman who was retired from Toronto 2 years ago who came, and we looked at some of the paperwork. And she realized that by the end of the day, in seeing what the take-home pay was, it was about the same as what she made. And she was a teacher in Toronto. So it wasn't that it was underpaid. It was cold and it was hard. And you're standing up with 15 pounds of fish in your hand all the time.
Yeah.
But it was a decent living.
Yeah.
And the whole island was employed. Maybe I should mention at this point, Grand Manan in its heyday produced 80% of the world's supply of smoked herring. This little island. It's amazing when you consider that people were doing it up and down the coast, Nova Scotia, all over the Maine, all over the place. And this one little island, 80% of the world's supply. They had years where they put out 1 million boxes. The boxes would either be 10-pound boxes or 18-pound boxes. It's a lot of fish, each being handled individually several times during this process.
Wow.
This is a labor-intensive business.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we have them. We've loaded them on our herring horse.